Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Getting back to work on the Cobra in this video. This one is not going to be so much on the car, it is going to be on the transmission. If you follow the channel, I pulled the T5 out a few weeks ago, and now it is time to do a teardown on it. So I'm going to walk you through disassembling the T5, getting everything out, and let's check the condition of it and see if it's something I want to rebuild or replace. All right, so here we have the transmission in question, and these are very simple if you kind of look at it as a big picture as far as disassembly and everything goes. Basically, a few steps that you have to follow in order to get this thing apart. First thing we're going to have to do is remove the shift lever mechanism. This, you push a pin through here with a punch, and it'll come off that rod. You need it off the rod so we can take the tail housing off. So that's going to be the first step. Once that is off, then you can remove the tail housing by removing all the bolts all the way around and then breaking the seal. And then once the tail housing is off, then you can remove the top cover and access the internals of the box. Have to do it in that order. There's no other way to do it. So couple of things I'm going to recommend. One thing is to definitely have it on some sort of pan or tray or whatever to catch oil, because even if you drain this thing using the drain plug, there's going to be residual and down here, and when you crack this, take the back half off of the main box, you are going to have transmission fluid come pouring out. Not a large amount, but enough where it will make a mess. So keep that in mind. You are going to want to work over some sort of pan to catch that fluid. So I'm going to start gathering tools together, and then we can get to work on tearing this transmission apart. All right, so as you can see, transmission is now sitting on my drain pan because, like I said, once you split these cases, oil will come out. So first step, and this is after you remove the shifter, so if you haven't done that yet, remove it. Need to remove the mechanism off of the shift rod. So what you're going to do is use a 3/16 punch and a hammer and just drive the roll pin through out the bottom. Now, just to let you know that this is on the shaft. Once you start sliding off the shaft, there is a ball detent underneath, and that's your feel for each gear. You'll see it when the detent's built in there. So there's going to be a spring and ball that are going to come out. Don't lose those. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a hammer, knock this out real quick, and I'll be back. All right, one thing I did forget to mention that I should have, you want to make sure that you are in neutral when you do this, because if not, the pin, if you hammer it all the way through, will get stuck in the detent and you can't move this at all. So what I did, I have that situation right now. I did use the punch and just push the shift rod forward all the way. So this is almost loose. Once I take the cover off, it'll all come out. So that's going to be your fix if you run into this situation. So I'm going to go grab a socket and start popping the back tail housing loose. All right, and I have most of the bolts out. The top two are all that remain. They're loose. It will take a 15 mil socket to get everything loosened up. As you can see, I mean, there are obvious signs that someone's been in this box. Again, I don't know the history of this car, but you can see all the goop around it, from when it's been apart before. I'm guessing it was to change the gear, the drive gear, for the 373s that are in the rear, but who knows what the history of this thing is and what I'm going to find when I pop it open. So I'm going to get these last two bolts out and then let the fluid drain out. And if you look on this side, you can see it already started weeping out this top hole when I had this on its side, loosening up bolts. And yeah, so we will get the last two bolts out and see what happens. All right, bolts are out, so all that's holding this together is the sealer. So probably a couple good whacks on the tail housing with a rubber mallet would probably loosen it up. If not, you may need to get a pry bar and just gently pry in some areas that you can get between the case. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab a few tools and get the case split. Yep, a couple whaps with the rubber mallets, all it took. You can see the shifter block is out now. There's your roll pin, spring, and ball. the pin was stuck in that hole there because I had it all the way back. So again, not the end of the world. And as soon as I hit this with a couple of whacks, it came off the very last little bit of the shaft that was in it. So you can see it's separated. Probably just gonna need a little bit of a pry tool just to get the rest of the way off, because there should be an O-ring up here, I believe, that seals this to the round there where the shaft is. Plus there may still be some adhesive from the sealer, and then I should be able to get the cases apart. And here we have it. Tail housing is off, and like I said, there is going to be that residual oil that's going to come out. You can see some sitting there in the base of the housing and whatnot. It wasn't terrible. Definitely whoever rebuilt this was very judicious with their use of adhesive, or not rebuilt it, but at least had it apart last. So when you get the housing off, you'll obviously see bushing, you'll see your speedo gear, and this is your 5th gear mechanism here. So next step is going to be to remove the shift fork housing, which is just going to be all of these. I believe they're 10 mils off the top of my head, all the way around the perimeter, and then you should be able to pull the housing up off of the top. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that socket and get the shift fork housing removed. All right, all bolts are removed, and yeah, like I thought, they were 10 millimeter heads, so 10 millimeter socket. You will need to remove the neutral safety switch, which I just used a crescent wrench to get it out because it's pretty large. You'll also notice I went ahead and clipped the wires off. This is no longer used in my car. I don't have a clutch interlock system. I deleted it, so this just needs to be basically used as a plug. But in order to access that bolt, you will need to remove the switch. Be careful that there is a little push rod in there that pushes on the detent ball that's in this switch, so don't lose the little push rod. It probably doesn't matter if you're not using it. If you are using it, don't lose it. Also, keep note, 2 of the bolts, this one here, do have a thicker body. Those are the 2 locating bolts to get everything lined up, and then the rest are just regular bolts. So now that all the bolts are out, I'm going to go ahead and grab that same rubber mallet and hit on this tab here to see if I can get this thing to come loose. I might have to use a little pry bar as well, but yeah, I'm going to use a little screwdriver, rubber mallet, and see if we can get this thing apart. All right, well, that was pretty easy. Just took one little hit and it came loose. So basically what you need to do, make sure it's in neutral. So you want this to be in like the center of the detents, and you should be able to move it back and forth, side to side. Once it's in neutral, basically the way to remove it is you push it off to the side and then lift up. So pushed it over, I'm gonna go ahead and grab both hands, lift it up, and remove it from the box. All right, you can see the forks are off. You do want to try and make sure you don't wiggle this too much and get things out of whack. Keep the mechanism where it's supposed to be, or else you have to get it all back in alignment. It's not always the most fun thing to do. First view of this, I don't see any cracks in the shift fork, so that's good. They have the original style plastic bushing, so nothing's been done to really hop this box up. I would guesstimate looking at that, and also looking at the retainer for the cluster down there. It looks like it's just the stock stamped retainer. There's no billet improvement. So yeah, this looks like it's probably gonna be a mainly stock box. So forks and top are off. These are your 1, 2, 3, 4 forks. Here you got your reverser fork, and also your 5th gear. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead, get this out of the way, get the transmission up on the bench, and then start walking through things. All right, so next thing I'm gonna remove, and I already started, is it's the throwout bearing / front retainer, seal retainer and everything. It's 4 bolts to remove it. They're 13 mil metric, and then there's a groove right here. You can get a large flathead in, give it a little twist, and it should pop any sealant off of it. And then you just slide it off. Once that's off, I'm gonna go ahead and remove the input shaft. In order to do that, there's a spot you'll see when you spin the mechanism. There is a flat spot right here. You need that to be down so it will clear the cluster for first gear there. That's how you get it out. So you'll twist that down, have that, and it'll walk over the cluster gear for first gear, and that'll get it out of the hole. So I'm gonna go ahead and get everything removed. All right, and you can see the retainer is removed, as well as the input shaft / first gear. Be very careful taking it out, just kind of go slow. And as you're turning it, you'll get a feel for when that dip right there that I was talking about clears the cluster gear. And then you just want to make sure you do not lose any of those little rollers that are inside of that gear. If you lose those, you gotta fish them out of the bottom. And if you weren't planning on taking this apart, guess what? You might have to, unless you got a good magnet and some dexterity. So that is what is involved in getting the input shaft out of the box. All right, so it is the next day as my battery died on my phone right after that last clip. So gonna be getting back to work on things. Next on the list is gonna be removing fifth gear so I can then get the main shaft out. One thing I noticed in my previous clips is I'd mentioned this was a bushing. This is not a bushing, this is a seal from when this thing is made. You do not need it. I don't know, the previous person who ever had it apart and changed this gear, put it back on, but this is not needed. You can go ahead, remove it, and discard it. But anyway, to go ahead and get fifth gear off, all you need to do is use that same punch you used for the shifter to 3/16 and knock out this roll pin, and then you can slide this whole assembly off of the shafts, and then we can work on getting the main shaft out. So you do want to try and support this. I would support it underneath the fork if possible with like a block of wood or something, so that way you're not going to bend this rod. So I'm going to go ahead and get that removed. All right, so you can see fifth gear fork is removed. You, like I said, may have to do a little wiggling and jiggling. Just try and hold the shaft in place so it's not moving around too much and doesn't get bound up inside and cause you some issues. But you will eventually get this to slide off. Now, one thing I did forget to mention is if you have a newer T5 and it has the reverse brake, I don't believe there's going to be this C-clip here, but if you have an older one like I do that does not have a reverse brake, you will need to remove this C-clip first. And then everything should come out. I forgot to do that, so then the synchro outer came off on its own, and then these three little pins popped off, and then I had to remove it and remove the gear. And once this gear was removed and the synchro was removed, I could then remove the fifth gear from the counter shaft. Just be careful, take your time. Sometimes they get kind of stuck on hydraulically from the oil. Watch if you have to pry what you're prying against. You may damage your brass synchronizer, so just watch out for things like that. Just go from there. So that is everything removed as far as getting fifth gear out of the way. Next on the list is going to be remove this bearing race here, slide that off, and then you should be able to pivot the main shaft up and out at like this angle. You do not need to remove this. This will be out of the way enough. So I'm going to go ahead, get that bearing race removed, and get the main shaft removed from the gearbox. And there you have it. The main shaft is out. Now, like I said, if you're very careful and you kind of angle it upward, you can kind of go in this direction and just slowly walk it away from this, and it will come out. Just, like I said, take your time, and you should be good to go. Make sure you don't mar up any bearings or gears or anything like that. But all in all, not too bad to do. So now that that is out, you can see a better idea of how the reverse and fifth gear synchronize or lever work. That is this lever here. It's operated up here from the forks up above, or the mechanism up above, but it's going to go forward. You'll see this move down and forward, and that is going to be your fifth gear. That's when it pulls forward on the back and engages the gears here. And then your reverse is going to be the opposite. Hard to do this one-handed. It's going to pull back and down like so, and you'll see the gears engage there. It's got a spring on it that pulls it back, but that is the reverse gear engagement. Sorry, I'm trying to do this one-handed. Right like that. And then when these two are touching together, they will engage this one here that has the straight teeth, and that is your reverse function. So that is how that operates. All right, next thing on the list to remove is the counter shaft, and in order to do that, you need to remove this plate. You should have tabs bent over all of the bolts to keep them from backing out when this is assembled. So you'll need to go ahead and use like screwdriver and hammer or whatever to bend the tabs back, and then you can remove the 4 bolts and the retainer plate. Once that's removed, you should be able to get the race out and start working on getting the counter shaft out. All right, you can see the plate is removed. One thing I think I forgot to mention in the prior clip is I did go ahead after removing the counter shaft and tilt this over to the side and dump out a lot of fluid because there was a pretty good amount still in the bottom. You still see some, but most of it came out. As far as removing this plate, one thing I will say is if you don't want to mess around trying to bend those tabs, you can use a T40 in the nuts or in the bolts and they'll kind of go past the tabs. All of my bolts were fairly loose. It did not take much to break them loose and run them past the tabs, which is a little worrying. It's going to probably round off the edges of the bolts, but in theory, you should be replacing the bolts and the retainer anyway, anytime you have this apart. So next is going to be remove the race out of here. That'll give you some wiggle room, and then you should be able to walk the cluster gear out of the top, similar to the main shaft. All right, jumping ahead, and this is actually the part where you're going to need some specialty tools. Probably should have mentioned that earlier, but I did pull out the rear race, so that is gone. And the next step is going to be you need to basically engage the reverse gear to get it out of the way, and then you're going to want to be able to pull the counter shaft up a little bit, and then you need to get a bearing retainer or puller underneath the bearing itself. So now you can see it's kind of floating down here, it's loose. It's not sitting in the cup on the bottom because this puller is flush against the case. Also, I used a small flathead screwdriver and removed the oil slinger, which you see there. And then the next step is going to be to use a press and push down on this, and it should pop the shaft loose from the bearing. All right, as you can see, the bearing is removed. It was really easy to pop off with the press and that tool. It did mangle the bearing, which again, I'm planning on rebuilding this anyway, so that's not the end of the world for me. I'm sure that if, with a better bearing holder, you could probably save the bearing. Mine's kind of angled. It's like a one size fits all, not the best, but again, replacing all the bearings anyway, because I have no idea how old this box is and when they were last done. So anyway, last step is going to be go ahead and just pull the shaft out. You're going to just, similar to the other one, lift from this end and angle it out the top. Just angle the tail out the hole. It'll just take a little manipulation and you should get it. And there you have it. Cluster gear is out. Not too terrible. Like I said, once you get the bearing off, it clears just fine. And there you can see the gear set and the bearing. So that is really as far as I'm going to go as far as the teardown goes. If you wanted to take out the reverse gear, that's pretty much just popping that pin out, sliding the shaft through. Same thing with this linkage. This hooks onto this bolt here with a little C-clip, and then there's the spring, and then this shaft slides out the back. But really not necessary in doing a rebuild. If your reverse gear looked like crap and you wanted to replace it, you obviously would do that. I mean, mine's got some wear on it. I'll think about what I want to do, if I want to replace it or not. I really never had an issue getting it into reverse, so I'm not too worried about it. But yeah, that is as far as I'm going to go with this disassembly. All right, so I had actually previously recorded what I'm about to talk about while these parts were in the box, and then realized I had a total brain fart moment and was looking at it backwards and read off the gear names backwards as I was describing things. So I'm going to redo this now that everything's out of the box. So as far as the operation of this gear set goes and how things work, you would obviously have your main gear riding on top of your cluster gear set. Gears in order. This is your fifth gear, which is going to be outside of the back of the main case. Then you have first, reverse, second, third, and fourth is going to be right here on your input shaft. It's separate, and then all those gears make contact with the cluster gear except for reverse until reverse is engaged, which I showed while the cluster gear is in there how that kind of works. When this is in there and that's in there, there is your little idler gear there that the lever will slide into position and connect the two, and that's how you get your reverse. But anyway, as far as how the gear mechanisms themselves work, we'll say with your first gear, you have the forks that ride in these grooves here, and that's what moves your synchros back and forth. First gear, to engage it, this is going to slide this way. You have your synchro, which is this little dark gray portion that you can see moves independently of the different sets. When this slides in, it starts to engage the synchro, which will then start to spin up the shaft to match speed, and that's how you get everything to match right. And hopefully not grind as it's engaging. If it grinds, it's these little teeth, these dog teeth that are on the gear itself that are grinding off. That is what you're hearing, those meeting with those synchro bits there. Second gear is going to be the opposite. Gear is going to go this way, and this synchro is going to be spinning at one speed, or at the speed of the shaft roughly, and it's going to move into and bite into the other portion of the synchro, which engaged to this gear, try and get this gear to match speed, and then everything comes together as it moves forward. It's all very quick motion, but that is in general how it is going to work. You can see basically here is kind of what it looks like. Here's the synchro itself, and you have fibrous material there that rides on the smooth portion of the gear itself, and it's just to try and get this shaft speed matched to the gear speed as things are engaging. And you can see the fourth gear assembly here, just how everything connects together. There's 3 grooves here on this that engage with these little bushes here on the inside, and that's just how everything keeps together and whatnot on the shaft. So that is roughly how the synchro mesh system works. Now, in reviewing everything, that was the other part of the video that I was going through. I was checking the status, and the condition. Looking at all my gears, the gears look pretty good for the most part. I don't see anything, really bad, out of spec, as far as, like anything that would worry me. There's no chip teeth or anything like that. The one thing I did notice a little bit, and we'll see if I can focus in, is this transmission has the typical T5 second gear grind. And this is second gear here that I'm spinning. Looking at the teeth on the gear, they definitely show some signs of wear. It's, trying to focus on my finger, not on the teeth itself, trying to get it to focus in a little bit better. But I mean, they don't look terrible, but I know part of the problem is just, the synchro system as a whole. Second gear is just a pain in the butt when it's cold on these T5s, but you can definitely see some wear on those teeth, in comparison to, say, like, here's third gear. They don't look anywhere near as chewed up, or say the fourth gear. Those look, pretty good. So that is basically what I was going through as far as condition of the shaft. I'm going to sit back and decide on which way I want to go, because I'm really leaning towards replacing the gear set in this transmission. I'd like to get a 295 first gear set. This currently has the standard 345, I think it is, or 355, whatever it is, or maybe 335. I'm blanking on it at the moment. But the standard gear set out of the normal Mustang T5. And with my 373 rear gear ratio, it's a pretty short first gear in the Cobra. So got to think about it, figure out what I want to do, and then go from there. But I at least wanted to revisit this, walk through the operation of the gear sets and how everything works, and just show you what I found when looking at mine. All right, I'm going to end this one here. Next steps, I need to figure out if I'm going to continue with rebuilding this transmission or replacing it. I need to first see if I can remove the locked up frozen drain plug, because that's going to determine if the case is reusable or not. So if I can get that out without cracking the case or anything, then I should be able to proceed, and I will most likely just end up rebuilding this unit with some different gears and different internals. So gonna think about that, and then I will get back to it. So if you want to follow along, if you like what you're seeing, please hit like, please hit subscribe, please hit the notification bell. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments section below. I do review them and I will reply. I do have a second channel related to firearms. There's a link in the description to this video if you want to check it out. I also do have some merch available. There is a link in the description as well, and you might see some of the items below this video. And that being said, thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.